many times.
Yep, there we go.
How are we doing now? Good? Better?
Yep, now you're streaming.
Okay. I'll let John know. So I can tell John to go live on cable?
Yeah, he might already be if someone already saw.
Lerv. No, we are live, not Lerv. Sorry. Helps if I can spell.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thanks for the meeting yesterday, Sarah.
Yeah, we had a. Did you get caught up with Peter? Because we had a long discussion.
Yeah.
Good.
And I emailed Tammy and thanked her for her support and indicated that we'll have a meeting between in the second week of September, dependent upon your schedule.
If you tell me now, I can block it out.
Well, your choice, whatever's best for you.
Early mornings are best, but other than that, I'm pretty
Yeah.
good. Not
7:30.
Tuesday mornings, but other than that.
Yep, good.
Hi, gang.
Hey, Eric.
Okay, we are live on all three streaming services, but we're waiting for Chip. He should be coming along, and I've got 3 minutes until 6:30. Oh, there he is. You beat me to it, Chip.
Yeah, I just didn't. My email hadn't updated yet. I was looking for it. I'm like, and then I talked to you, and there it was.
We need Dan.
Dan, yes, you're right.
I'll be right back.
Hey,
Hey,
Dan.
Dan.
Hello, everybody.
And thank you, Dan, for the meeting.
For the meeting, you're welcome. What meeting?
Ordinance.
Ah.
Peter filled me in afterwards for what I missed.
Oh, I forgot that you had to leave early.
Good call on the outdoor venue, Dan. Nice work.
Yeah, we'll see how long I last. Last time I didn't get attacked by mosquitoes, so hopefully it'll be the same.
Earlier sunset
Yeah, for sure.
and rain today.
All right, Mr. Chair, we are recording whenever you are ready to go.
Okay. I'll just wait for the clock to tick 6:30. All right, call the meeting to order. Council meeting number 18-20. It is August 18th, 2020. We are meeting on Zoom this evening. If you are watching this, hopefully you'll remain connected, assuming we have electricity for the balance of the evening. The way the council meetings work on Zoom is we have a two-tier engagement here that the council members and staff and anyone who is invited to speak have audio capabilities where everyone that's on the screen right now can hear. And then there are participants or members of the public who are logged in and can watch the proceedings and listen, but won't be able to speak unless identified and moved over to the panelist side by Peter Joseph, our town manager. So if you are attending this meeting as a member of the public, we are going to have some opportunity to speak at our other business item later on. And we also have a standing agenda item, public participation on non-agenda items, which will be coming up shortly. And so the method to participate is to use the raise hand feature, which will identify your name and or phone number. And Peter will then recognize you and move you over, and you'll be able to address the council in live time. So that's just a little primer about how the Zoom meetings work. I'll go over that again in case you missed it, or if anybody is tuning in after 6:30. But we'll go through our agenda, starting with our first item, which is a roll call. And I'll just go down the list as I see councilors here. Councilor Whitney.
Here.
Councilor Tracy.
Here.
Councilor Lawrence.
Here.
Councilor Pilch.
Here.
Councilor Horn.
Here.
Councilor Riley.
Present.
And the chair, John Egan, is here. Great to have everyone in attendance. Our agenda this evening is rather light with action items, but we have a substantial discussion, I'm sure, on another business item related to trash in this town and recycling. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Tony has the flag, so please join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation,
nation,
Under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tony. It's nice to rely on that you, every single meeting, have that flag. Our second order of business is to waive the reading of the minutes as duly presented by Sharon Coffin of our meeting number 17-20 held on August 4th, 2020. That meeting was interrupted by a power outage and does not actually notate an adjournment, but we did actually adjourn the meeting with just a few of us left long after, or several minutes after the power cut off. So the meeting was officially adjourned. I'll take a motion to waive the minutes.
Move to adjourn, or move to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All right, the motion's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the minutes? Like all of the votes when we're on electronic Zoom here, we have to do an individual notation of a councilor's vote to make sure that we're capturing it on the record. So every time the council takes a vote, I read off all of the names and you'll get to hear each councilor's vote. Councilor Whitney.
Yes.
Councilor Riley.
Yes.
Councilor Tracy.
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence.
Yes.
Councilor Pilch.
Yes.
Councilor Horn.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The minutes are accepted. Thank you, Sharon. Our third order of business is announcements. This would be a chance for councilors to make any announcements that they have. I've got a couple that were included in my package. Of particular note, West Street, if you haven't driven downtown, is closed to through traffic from Woodlawn Cemetery to the South Street intersection through next Friday, August 28th. The closure may extend into the following week if we have some weather delays that's holding up construction. The town is replacing a culvert that drains nearly the entire village area. This is an important stream restoration work and is made possible by 2 grants that we've received and some local match. The depth of the cut in the utilities require the road to be closed during the replacement. Traffic detours are available around the work area via Bow Street and Depot Street. Traffic control signage will be installed and is already actually in place. If anyone has questions about the specifics of that important stormwater management improvement on West Street, feel free to call Adam Bliss, our town engineer, at 865-4743, extension 106, who's visible on the screen this evening. Thank you, Adam. Nomination papers for the November 3rd, 2020 municipal election are due back to the town clerk's office no later than 6 o'clock on Wednesday, September 9th. There are a number of seats available. The following offices are open for candidates to take out papers, and they are Councillor at Large, 1 seat, Councillor District 2, 1 seat, Councillor District 3, 1 seat. There are 2 seats available on the RSU 5 Board of Directors from the town, and there are 2 seats available on the Freeport Sewer District Board of Trustees, and 1 seat available on the Freeport Water District Board of Trustees. If you have questions about these items or are interested in taking out papers, please contact Christine Wolf, our town clerk, at 865-4743, extension 123. The last item I want to mention is specifically, I think, crucial with a lot of discussion nationally about absentee ballots and mail-in ballots and the timing available for such. Absentee ballots for the November 3rd, 2020 election are available now by requesting such from the town clerk's office, 865-4743, extension 122 or 123. The online module to request absentee ballots at maine.gov won't be active for another couple of weeks, but ballots requested now will be mailed the first week of October. Starting October 5th, voters may vote in person at Town Hall. So I just want to stress that there's a number of ways, particularly in the middle of our pandemic, if people are wanting to avoid gathering at a public polling place on November 3rd, I want to make it clear that we are offering a number of ways for people to get an absentee ballot. They can request run a municipal ballot from the town clerk, and the state ballot will be available in a little while. They can also come in and pick up a ballot at Town Hall and vote now. So I'm sorry, starting October 5th, not now. So that's a full month in advance of the election that anyone who wishes to come in on their own convenience when the crowds are very small. There is plenty of social distancing protocol being upheld at Town Hall. You'd be able to vote your absentee ballot early in person at Town Hall without having to deal with the crowds, and we can accommodate that. Councillor Riley. You have to unmute.
And the state attorney general has allocated 105% of the eligible voters into absentee ballots for the town of Freeport. So there will be no shortage of those.
Right. So, and if anybody's got questions, please just call Chris Wolf. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to get your hands on an absentee ballot and cast your vote this fall. That's all the announcements I have. Other councilors have any other specific announcements they'd like to make? I will say that I don't know how many people we may have lined up to listen to the meeting, Peter, or possibly participate in the other business item later on. We will be getting to that shortly. We don't have much of a tangible agenda. And so there'll be an opportunity for us to take some comment from those members of the public at that time. Okay, seeing no other items on announcements, our fourth order of business is information exchange. Generally, this is an opportunity for councilors to talk about committee meetings and other community groups that they may have attended since our last meeting 2 weeks ago, and share information that was either decided upon or discussed at those committees. Councilor Riley.
The ordinance committee met on Monday. We had 3 items on our agenda. One is a discussion of complete streets policy, and it was moved and recommended by the ordinance committee unanimously to move this forward to council, and hopefully it'll be scheduled for public comment and approval very soon. We also continued a discussion on short-term rentals, and the town manager, along with staff, will put together some of the items that we were looking for. One of those being creating a registry and a registry questionnaire. And there is more that will be added to this, but it's beginning the process there. The third item was discussion of inconsistencies of noise standards within the ordinances. And so working with the community group, we will begin the process of identifying those and moving either through ordinance where ordinance is required, or directing to planning board where planning board is required. And that's the ordinance committee meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Riley. Any other members? Councilor Whitney.
I'm continuing to work with Chief Nurse and Johanna Hasselman on the COVID Relief Fund, which is a fund of donations that have been set up to help out residents in Freeport who have been financially affected by this pandemic. And it's been a privilege to get to know some of the people who have stepped forward, hardworking people in town that have lost their jobs, a lot of them working more than one job, and be able to help them out a little bit during this time. And also, I've been working with the school system and Peter and Keith and businesses around town, just try to see if we might be able to have some space around town opened up to start to spread the school kids around a little. And I know that that's under other business, and Peter will be talking about that more at length later on tonight. Thank you.
Great. Any other committees that folks want to talk about? Dan?
I attended a Winslow Park Commission meeting, which was the first in a few months. I won't belabor that, but Neil Lyman, our manager, as always, is doing a great job managing the park. Numbers are down, but sustainable. So everything is going fine there. And I also attended a meeting of a subgroup that is reviewing police policies in relation to everything that's going on this year. So we're doing it piecemeal. First policy was around hate crimes, bias crimes, and civil rights. And we're kind of going through the police policies more or less one at a time and reviewing them. I think there are a couple of more people who have expressed interest in joining the group, and I'll coordinate that with Lisa Andreasen, who is volunteering her time to facilitate. So things are going well there as well.
Great. Last evening, I attended the Sustainability Advisory Board, and the entire topic of conversation was the agenda item that's at the end of our agenda this evening, potential opportunities to reduce the amount of solid waste trash going into the landfill and increase the volume of recycling. There are a number of ways to get to that. We're going to hear from the committee later on this evening, so I won't say much about it. Now, I also attended a discussion with a couple of organizers of the Black Lives Rally back in June, and that group is interested in asking if the council would like to have an opportunity to get some training and potentially some participation in, whether it's in person or online, a group discussion about how, as a community and certainly as a town, we can improve on our implicit racial bias awareness, and just examine some things that potentially haven't been looked at in a while, similar to what the police department is doing with their policies. there may be an opportunity for a group led by some trained folks to review some of the HR policies or other things going on in town government to identify that we're not inadvertently or implicitly discriminating. It's a good conversation to have, and it's one that a lot of members of the public are asking us to have. So there's nothing formal yet. I just wanted to let you know that that is percolating and that there's likely going to be a specific invitation to the council coming up later this fall. Any other announcements or information exchange items? Okay. The next item on our agenda is the town manager's report. Peter Joseph.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you for also reporting on all of my items in your earlier announcements. Somebody was so kind as to give you most of them. What I was going to talk a little bit about West Street, which we've already done. I think the summary will stand. It's closed. We can expect it to be closed for about 2 weeks, week and a half here at least, going forward, as long as nothing goes wrong weather-wise. So that's West Street. I did want to expound just a little bit on absentee voting. We're making a big push to educate people on this. So we've developed a outline document that's going to go up on our website. Also going to be doing some presentations to community groups that kind of came up last minute, which is great. A few things that I wanted to add to what the chair had mentioned are just clearing up some misconceptions. So this is going to be a lot of, we're seeing most people register and absentee vote for the first time, in their lives, people who voted in person. So a few misconceptions and frequently asked questions that people have. The first is that you don't need a justification to absentee vote in the state of Maine. That is something that exists in many places in the United States, many states and jurisdictions. You have to have a valid reason. They've mostly expanded that to include coronavirus, but here in Maine, just wanting to vote absentee is enough reason to get an absentee ballot. So also wanted to point out that there are special provisions, or we make special provisions for any voter with disabilities that can affect their ability to vote. So if that's you, so for example, somebody who might have trouble with a traditional absentee paper ballot or requesting a paper ballot, any way that you can get in touch with the town clerk's office, so that's Chris Wolf, at the town hall number extension 123, or C Wolf, WOLFE at freeportmaine.com, or a family member, if you have a family member that would reach out to Chris. There are accommodations that can be made and steps can be taken to help out people access their right to vote. So wanted to point that out. That's often lost in the absentee shuffle. That's not pointed out. The online registration at maine.gov is actually up right now. And it's important to differentiate between if you request a absentee ballot now versus if you come in early vote starting October 5th. So any requests that are made, whether they be in writing on the state website, maine.gov, or over the phone to the town clerk right now, prior to October 5th, are automatically going to get you a paper ballot mail. They're all paper ballots, but it will get you a mailed ballot to your registered voting address. If you do not want to do that, so a lot of people are concerned about what they're hearing out about the delays in the mail right now. So if that's something that concerns you, you probably don't want to request a ballot ahead of time because that's automatically going to get mailed to you. And USPS is estimating maybe up to 2-week delay. We don't think that's the case here in Maine where they're going to be staying local, but some people are getting these across the country or foreign from here in Maine. So that's something to keep in mind. If you request prior to October 5th, it will be mailed out. If you come in to vote, early vote in person on October 5th or later, obviously it's done. You're done that day. Everything's done. The ballot gets recorded here and it gets sealed and held until the election. If you get a ballot sent to you because you pre-registered or requested one ahead of time, you do not have to mail it back. They can be dropped off. This is a question that we're getting a lot of right now. They're anytime during business hours, Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 6 p.m., 7:30 A to 6:30 P. Monday through Thursday, the clerk's office is open to accept drop-off ballots. That has to be either by you, the voter, or an immediate family member. Also, there's going to be a drop box. There is a drop box, but it will be set up specifically for absentee ballots on the side entrance to the town hall, the main one you come in usually if you come. So after hours, you can drop them in that steel lockbox. And I think that's it. And if you choose to mail it back, just be aware that depending how many pieces of paper we get, how many actual card ballots that are, that are part of the package that get mailed out to you, if it's overweight, which typically they are, if there are 3 or 4 or 6 different sheets in the ballot stack, they will require a second stamp or additional postage. I think it was like 70 cents, 75 cents or something like that for the last election. So you're going to want to make sure either at the desk at the counter at the post office, or you just put extra postage on that so it doesn't get turned away. And like I said, up to the Postal Service is telling us that it can be up to a 2-week delay. So if you are going to vote by mail, do that early in case that any of the talk we're hearing about delayed mail ballots actually pans out. You just want to be safe. Again, if that concerns you, just drop it off here up until the day before elections. So Monday the 2nd, ballots can be dropped at the town hall up until the close of business. On Tuesday, November 3rd, they have to be dropped at the high school, at the polling place. And you can drop them off up until the polls close at 8 p.m. So I think that's just about everything about absentee voting that anybody wanted to ever know, but it's going to be a very important topic. As I said at the last council meeting, we had about 3/4 of people vote by absentee at the most recent primary election. So we're going to keep hammering it, and we're going to make sure that people know what the process is and how to exercise their absentee voting rights. And that's all I have right now, Mr. Chairman. I think we've got a full house, and we will probably move on.
Great. Thank you very much. Our next item is public comment on non-agenda items. This is a chance for members of the public to address the council on topics or issues that are on their mind that are not specifically on our agenda. I do want to just put a little caveat that very shortly, because we don't have any other items other than the consent agenda, we will be going into an other business discussion that is not taking any action this evening. That'll be discussing trash pickup and recycling, and particularly some recommendations from the Sustainability Advisory Board. So those topics will be discussed shortly, I would say in less than 10 minutes. If that's why you're here to participate, we ask you to wait until we open that item for public participation. If there's something else that you're interested in, this is the time to use the raise hand feature that will identify your name and or phone number on the screen that Peter can see, and he will move you over to the active participants level, and you'll be able to talk to the council in real time back and forth. So I know it may take a second or two. I'll just try and give folks a little bit of time here if they wanted to use the raise hand feature. If you're calling in on the phone, you can also press *6, which will get you identified as a list of phone numbers on that same screen, and the manager will move you over in order that we receive the indication, and you'll be able to address the council. So do you have anybody lining up yet, Peter, with the raise hand?
Not right now.
Okay.
Spoke too soon. Yes, there's one.
Yeah, it always takes a couple of seconds, so I want to make sure we give people plenty of time to indicate their interest. So do we have someone, Peter?
Yes, I've got Pam. I'll bring Pam over.
Great. Go ahead, Pam.
Hi, John. It's Pam Barry Santos. Just wanted to piggyback on the voting thing. Since I moved to Maine, I had absentee voted in Arizona easily. And when I moved here, super easy. Shout out to Chris. Every single time that I have done it online where I've requested the ballot, I get the confirmation the next day that it went through just fine. And every time on the very first day that the ballots are being sent out, I seem to get it in the mail. So just to reinforce the fact that it is super, super, super easy to do, and it's handled really well in town. So thanks.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Pam.
So the public comment period is on every agenda that the town council has at its regular meetings. It's an opportunity for us to hear from folks live at a council meeting. I will say that contacting council members by email or telephone is also a way to reach us. And that apparently works very well because I've received a significant number of messages on our particular item at the end of the agenda this evening. So if you are either shy or not interested this evening to participate, you can always send an email or call one of us directly. The opportunity here is that you get to address the entire council at once and have a little back and forth dialogue in real time if so interested. Anybody else, Peter, lining up for public participation?
Not for public. Oh, spoke too soon. I've got Shannon's hand up. I'll bring you over, Shannon.
Great.
I should just stop talking because every time I say something, someone puts a hand up. Hi, Shannon, you're on.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Oh, and the dog says hi too, sorry. I'm on for another reason, but I also just wanted to bring up again, I've asked about this in the past. If there's any way that we can get some funding to the community development or businesses, I don't know what, but to get, for lack of a better term, poop bags put up throughout town. For those of us who live in the village and do take care of our pets, it's great, but a lot of people don't when they come into town, and even with the few number of people that are in town and they park their RVs on Depot Street and then they leave their dog stuff behind. It's disappointing. So I don't know if there's funding anywhere that we can try to get a few put up like Beans has on their campus.
Excellent idea. Thank you, Shannon. I'm sorry I have not heard that before, but that's an excellent idea. And I'm sure we can work with staff to find a way to make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank
Adam,
you.
you have a comment on that, Adam?
I do, if I may. We have these stations at some of our town facilities, so I can see that we somehow find another location in the village where appropriate.
Yeah, sounds like numerous ones, according to comments.
It'll make us look good on our environmental permit too.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Shannon. Peter, anyone else lining up to address the council during public comment?
Well, I want to say no. Oh, and nobody put their hand up this time. Okay, we're all set, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so if those of you who may be waiting to talk about trash and recycling, that's coming up very shortly. We'll have some public comment during that discussion. Just a reminder, there is no vote or action being taken this evening on that item. It is a discussion item for other business only. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment period just to make sure, Peter, no one else has raised their hand. The last thing I want to do is cut off somebody who wants to address the council. So,
No, sir.
yeah, okay. Thank you. Our seventh order of business or next order of business is to take action on the following item of business as read by the council chair. This is related to the consent agenda to consider action relative to adopting the August 18, 2020 consent agenda. Councilor Whitney, could you please read the be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the August 18th, 2020 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. There's only one item on the consent agenda this evening, the appointment of Brian Batchelder to the Sealer of Weights and Measures position. Any reason to take that item off of the consent agenda? Okay, the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. We'll take a vote. Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Consent agenda passes. Okay, that actually concludes our action items, very few indeed this evening. And I might just say that typically we are enjoying a fine buffet dinner out at Buston's Island on this evening, which is not possible due to the pandemic. But I sure hope those folks are looking forward to us coming out next year. We have two items under other business. One of them, which may or may not be necessary, is the second one regarding any adjustments to RSU facilities. But the first one is a continuing discussion, picking up where we were interrupted by a power outage 2 weeks ago. We were in the middle of first discussion of some recommendations from our Sustainability Advisory Board on some potential options for increasing the amount of recycling in our community and decreasing the amount of trash volume overall as a town. And in particular, there are a couple of options that board was presenting. I just want to start with a little bit of a context setting statement, because we've received, at least I've received, and I believe many counselors have also received, an enormous amount of input from the public about trash pickup, who they like as a trash hauler, and specifically what they don't want is the town telling them who to pick as a trash hauler. And I believe a lot of that reaction or that comment was in reaction to a notice that one of the haulers included with a lot of his customers. I'm one of his customers, and I got the notice this morning when he came to my house. I just want to state plainly for those listening that there, at the meeting last time and certainly at tonight's meeting, there is no action proposed. There is no vote being taken. We're not concluding anything about how Freeport as a community handles municipal solid waste or trash and recycling. We are at this point just having a conversation, just starting a discussion about potential options as a means to reduce the amount of solid waste going into the landfill, improve the amount of recycling content, and most importantly, to actually reduce the cost of trash to the entire community by lowering the amount of money that the town pays to Eco Maine for trash hauling this evening. Trash hauling for the community. So the conversation tonight is really just to hear some different options. The council is far from making any specific decision or even recommending any particular options. It became clear to me over the past week or so from talking with the public that we have a lot more education and information to share and a much bigger communications campaign to have about this issue, about why we're interested in talking about it. Many people that have contacted me and other members of the council are perfectly satisfied with the way the trash situation is in our community. And I don't deny that is a true statement, that they're plenty satisfied. What we're trying to look at is a combination of trying to save some money for the town and also to improve the environmental sustainability of our community by increasing recycling and reducing the amount of solid waste trash going into the landfill or the incinerator. So those are the goals and the objectives of this conversation, is to focus on those items. We have a well-informed and research-driven sustainability advisory board who's got some data to present, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I just wanted to let everybody know that there's no vote planned this evening and no action planned. And so the concern that the council is about to take a move to put a particular business owner out of business is not true, and it's not part of tonight's conversation. So I just want to make that clear. I know we've gotten a lot of input from the public as a group here on the council. Does anybody else have any sort of anything to open here before we get into the conversation with our members of the Sustainability Advisory Board? Councilor Riley.
I think you probably have the record for the number of responses you've had to this, but I've had well over 90 emails, and unfortunately, many times I've been unable to get my mail because I've been talking with my constituencies in the South Freeport Post Office there as they're locking the door. So it's been very beneficial for me, and it helps me to understand where I should position myself in response to what my constituents are bringing forth.
Right. Thanks. One of the components of discussion items was to try and facilitate and improve the amount of recycling that goes on from the waste stream, is to try and actually make it more convenient or eliminate hurdles for people to separate recyclable items from their trash. And there's a number of ways that are going on today that are already doing that. The most successful one, I think, is the trash compactor at our transfer station that takes recycling. It's practically a community center there on Saturdays when you meet many of the people that you might not see otherwise in the community, doing the same thing you're doing, which is emptying their recycling into the single source compactor and potentially dropping off trash bags or compost as well. So that's one of the ways. There is a hauler who is doing curbside recycling pickup for a cost. That's a private arrangement between a homeowner or a business owner and that company. And then there are recycling containers, 2 of them in the community today, one at the Hunter Road Public Works office yard, and one behind the Public Safety Building on West Street, which is still accessible even though West Street is closed. So there are a couple of different ways, several different ways for folks to recycle. And I think part of the starting initiative is to see what's working, what's not working, look at some data. Last year, this council voted to remove 2 of the public recycling containers due to heavy, continued, and ongoing contamination. And the contamination meaning non-recyclable items being mixed in with the recyclables. And that causes the entire container to be transferred over to the trash side of the operation at Eco Maine at considerable cost to the town. Not only were we paying for the shipping of the container, but we were also then paying tipping fees to empty it, largely recyclable material that didn't have to go into the landfill or the incinerator. Due to the high level of contamination, those 2 containers were pulled back, and we have some data available when we get to it that the town engineer has put together that shows some improvement in recycling habits of our community at large, with some more improvement yet to go. So we're taking steps in the positive direction. But I think there's a number of different alternatives out there. And the conversation tonight is simply to just start the dialogue with our sources and our committee. So I think the way this went last time is that Adam presented some data, which we have in our minutes and we've seen. But there's also members of our Sustainability Advisory Board present at this evening that would also like to address the council and talk about their motives for recommendations. So I'm open if somebody has a preference on which way we should proceed and who we should be hearing from first. Otherwise, we'll probably just go ahead and ask Adam to start. But is there a preference on how we go about this discussion? Councilor Riley?
Yes, I would prefer to have Adam speak first. And I think it's important for the residents of our community to realize that Adam was charged with the responsibility of generating this report. And it is a report on his findings. It is not necessarily his personal opinion. And it is important to realize that we ask for this.
Right. Right. All right, so Adam, I know you were able to give most of your presentation at the last meeting, but it got interrupted before we had any conclusion on even finishing digesting your presentation. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to the conversation this evening before we hear from Volley and the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board?
Nothing new to add. Councilor Egan, I think you did a great job summarizing where we've been and where we're at. You articulated that well, that this was an idea generated from the Sustainability Committee with great intention. And thank you, Councilor Riley, for communicating that this was a task that I was charged with and gratefully accepted. And I prepared the memo, which we discussed at the last meeting. And that memo is not an exhaustive analysis. It takes the most basic components, those being cost, impacts to local businesses, the town charter, and recyclables contamination, and just opens up those 4 cans so that we can have a place to start. There is more analysis to be performed. This, again, that's a starting point, because there's no sense going to preparing a 50-page report that ultimately doesn't generate enough interest in pursuing a new collection model. It would be helpful to hear the Sustainability Advisory Board's perspective. So unless there are specific questions for me, I think it would be good to hear from them. Otherwise, I just end up talking detail, and I don't think we're ready for that quite yet.
Okay, I know I'd also invited Rod Regier, who is our representative on the Maine board, past town councilor, and has an enormous amount of knowledge about this issue. And I'm hoping Rod will participate with us this evening and lend his perspective as well. I'm not sure if he's on yet. I can't see the list of participants. Councilor Riley, do you have a comment before we move forward?
This is a question of Adam, and that is, today we have 2 silver bullets in operation, and we have a pickup schedule that you may wish to offer us. But when we first pulled the other 2 silver bullets out, we had a pickup schedule that was not on as many days. I think we had quite a few fewer days. So where are we, and how far have we come, and what's our load percentage?
Good question. As you know, we have 3 options for disposing recyclables. The 3 are the transfer station, West Street, and Hunter Road. We've removed South Freeport Village and Doherty's Market. The 2 locations that were removed have generally been spread to the other facilities, the other 3. The West Street is very popular and required that we add an extra hauling day, certainly during the summer period because of visitations, but also with the pandemic, the amount of cardboard boxes from online shopping has it's put a strain on the efficiency of those containers in terms of they fill fast by volume, but not by weight, because they're not condensed, they're not compacted. So to answer your question, West Street is hauled presently 5 days a week because of these dynamic changes, and Hunter Road is hauled 3 days a week.
Adam, prior to the 2, when there were 4, what was the general schedule of West Street?
I believe it was 4 days. It was at least 3, but I believe it was 4. I'd have to double check on that.
Okay, Peter, you had a comment before. No, okay. So before we move forward, I just want to give a little bit of structure and outline of for everybody to have a chance to speak. We specifically invited the Sustainability Advisory Board to open with some motives behind their recommendation, the reasons why they're suggesting a number of options here for us to improve our recycling and decrease our solid waste stream. And they'll be presenting some data as well as some potential options for us to take. And then after that brief presentation, then we can take some participation from the members of the public. This is an informal item. Again, there is no action or vote anticipated this evening by the council. There is no resolution or decision that we're making this evening. It's really just a conversation for us to learn about the issues and the dynamics that are going on. So I believe Vali Steverlink is going to make the presentation from the advisory board. Peter, could you bring over Vali?
Okay, you should be here, Vali. We've got you on video and audio if you'd like, but you don't have to if you don't have a camera handy.
She's showing as being muted.
I mute myself. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can. Good
Okay,
evening, Vali.
perfect. So thank you for allowing us a few minutes to basically introduce the reasons why the Sustainability Board brought this to your attention. We have noticed over the years that the recycling contamination is quite high in Freeport, and that the ease with which people can recycle is not great. So we basically came up with a few ideas that we wanted to address. One of them was adding convenience to the recycling process for all residents in town. And the purpose would be to increase the rate of recycling. We all know that recycling, when it gets disposed of at Maine, costs about half the price of trash. So as far as the financial equation, it would be very advantageous to the taxpayer in Freeport to have a higher rate of recycling and lower the rate of trash or solid waste disposal. So we have seen that if the town gets involved and promotes recycling via interns or education campaigns, the contamination drops drastically. Last summer, our board used some of our funds to hire 2 interns who were able to approach people at the Silver Bullets, and they were able to successfully lower the contamination rates. That has not been the case with the private haulers. Pine Tree is the largest hauler that actually picks up recycling at the curb in Freeport. And unfortunately, their contamination rates have continued to be very high. So it has come to our attention that for the town to be able to get involved and address the contamination with a private hauler, there would have to be some kind of RFP process and contract issued to the private haulers so that there wouldn't be a straight relationship between a private company and customers that the town couldn't get involved in. So that's where the idea of curbside recycling came up. It's done basically in every community surrounding us. It's not a novel idea. We just talked to other communities around us to see how they were addressing these 2 issues, their contamination rate and how they were trying to address the rates of recycling and increase them. And pretty much all of them do curbside recycling to address both of those things. And additionally, of course, the issue of cost is paramount to this proposal. If we can reduce the amount of trash that we send, then we save money for the taxpayer. And if we reduce the contamination rate, then we don't have to pay the fees for contaminated recycling, which has now been transferred to the private hauler because it was an unsustainable situation. But nevertheless, that was one of the ideas that we had in mind when we brought this forth to you. So that basically are the 2 most salient reasons why we started this, but there are also other possibilities that would come with the implementation of curbside. One of them would be that in the future, the town could move on to implement curbside for composting, for example, which further reduces the cost of trash disposal. It's very expensive to dispose of anything that's wet, like compost, because of the weight. And it's very inefficient to burn wet things in the incinerator. So from a sustainable point of view, it makes sense to try to implement composting in the future. That's not something for now. And we also were trying to address with the paper bag proposal, the idea that it's a fair way to distribute the cost of disposal of the trash. Users who generate more would pay more because bags would be accounted for individual households. So in a way, for those who are more careful and try to generate less trash, it would be the advantage added that they would see a reduction in cost. There are other members of the committee on this call. Kate Rosenfeld is no longer a member, but she is very, very well informed, and I'm sure she would like to add to what I just said. And Josh Owens, the chair, is also here, so if he wants to add anything, that would be great. But Kate has a lot of information about the way that other towns are structuring RFPs, what kinds of possibilities there are, and how to accommodate all players in our town so that we can involve small and large haulers, and that the residents who want to have options may have access to different services. So Kate, I'll just turn it over to you, and maybe you can add to this.
Thank you, Vali.
Welcome.
Hello, town councilors. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening, Kate.
Thanks. Good evening. Thank you. Yes, taking up where Vali left off, just to reiterate, we're coming at this. I'm no longer on the committee, but when we were on the committee, we were coming from this wanting to decrease, realizing that the cost of dealing with trash and recycling is increasing. So how can we cut costs, and how can we and realizing that it costs the town more to dispose of trash than it does in recycling, how can we minimize trash and increase recycling? So that's again how we got here. And so it's really about environmental issues, and it's about financial issues for the town and for our taxpayers. So I was curious to see what other towns have been doing about this. And of course, we're not alone. And so I just gathered information from their websites and made a few calls to 14 nearby communities. And what I found was that currently, and this is Bath, Biddeford, Cumberland, Durham, Falmouth, Gorham, North Yarmouth, Portland, Pownell, South Portland, Topsham, West Bath, Windham, and Yarmouth. So they're nearby, and some of them, a lot of them are roughly the size of our town. Some are a little bigger, some a little smaller. What I found is that currently 9 of the 14 have municipal curbside pay as you throw or pay per bag programs. So those programs are run by their towns, and they offer curbside recycling pickup and curbside trash pickup. The trash must be placed in a bag that residents buy for it to be picked up. And the cost of those programs is supported in part by the pay-as-you-throw bags. That idea, as Vali was talking about, pay-as-you-throw is kind of like paying for electricity that you use. So it's meant to be a more, if you're producing more trash, you buy more bags. You're decreasing your trash, you're buying less bags. 7 of those 9 programs that have curbside pay as you throw, 7 of those have very similar bag prices. 2 of those have much lower bag prices. So bag prices can be adjusted and can be somewhat flexible. 4 of the remaining 5 towns do something significant to either increase recycling or decrease trash. And I can give you specifics about what those programs look like, but we are in the category where we aren't doing, but where we certainly could be doing more to, and that's the Sustainability Committee's view and my view, we could be doing more to decrease our trash production and increase recycling. I could leave it at that for now.
Mr. Chair, I've also put Josh on, who's the chair of the Sustainability Committee here. He just had his hand up.
Okay.
I'll be really brief because our previous 2 speakers spoke so eloquently about the issue. I do want to add one more piece, and that is as we get closer to moving forward with proposals and even perhaps an RFP at some point, I do want to ensure that Danny Wentworth and anyone else who would like to be involved should be involved. I actually reached out to him personally yesterday and we had a really positive conversation. And I do want to remind all of us that the town has made a previous commitment to him and his business, and we certainly want to support him and his hopes to stay in business as long as he wishes to. And I want to recommit, make sure that our town is recommitting too to him if he is interested in staying involved as a hauler of any sort. Obviously, we're looking and we're thinking about things that are new, and you know, as changes come, it's important to keep up with those changes. But we certainly don't want to lose great local businessmen and all of his happy customers. So I look forward to some form of compromise and solution that involves everybody who wants to be involved, but at the same time increases the rate of recycling and decreases the town's costs. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Josh. And thank you, Kate and Vali, for your time and effort and specifically your diligence to get at the details of the issue here. It's great to have that data available. I think that the focus here, which is, in my opinion, I guess maybe what previously we have not communicated very well, but was just articulated, which is that the goal of having this conversation in the first place is to increase the amount of recycling content that the town can generate, which is diverted from the waste stream. And I think that's pretty well understood when you can, meet somebody at the transfer station and see what they're doing, or have that conversation, at the grocery store, at the post office. Getting behaviors to change may be something that is much harder reach, but I think we have to start with having a much better communication and information effort in our community to really understand and share with the public what are the issues and some of the data that we just heard from, and the compelling arguments about how this can save money for the town's taxpayers. So that's our the input from our sustainability board. While we have the microphone open, so to speak, Peter, are there other members of the public that wish to have a conversation with us or present something?
Oh, I'm sure there are. We've got about 30 people in the audience. One, Rod Regier has his hand up, and I know you had mentioned previously.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Rod to comment at this time. Rod Regier is a past counselor and is our representative on the Eco Maine board. as a contributing community, we get a seat on that board and find out a lot of really valuable information about the whole trash dynamic in our community. So Rod has been studying this way longer than most of us up here on the council. And so I appreciate his perspective.
He's with us.
Rod, go ahead. If you can hear us, we're waiting to hear from you.
I'm seeing a problem here. There's two Rods in the audience. I'm going to put both of them over. I think one might be his phone line. Either that or we've got a Zoom bomber who's going to spam us. So just cover your eyes, everyone.
Okay, testing this. Is this any better? Does this work?
We've got you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. This is a bit of a hybrid. I don't have a camera, so I'm using my cell phone so I can actually talk, but I'm using my computer screen so I actually see all of you. Before I say anything, I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm not wearing my Eco Maine hat. My comments are my own. I mean, it's Eco Maine's interest is strictly to get all of Freeport's trash and all of its recycling. The recycling is uncontaminated as possible. But as far as how it's collected in towns, Eco Maine is no part of this. So please be clear, I'm not wearing my Eco Maine hat, although I'm going to be referring to Eco Maine in my experience there. This comes from a number of years of meetings down there, as well as just coffee conversations. And I think that one of the outstanding comments is how different every town is among Eco Maine communities. And unless you get into the weeds for those differences, it can be very, very difficult and even misleading to compare towns. I've long thought, for instance, that Freeport's recycling rates are artificially low because those rates don't include the material that residents have dumped in those hundreds of black composting barrels that were distributed some years ago. That just doesn't show up in the data. And Freeport's, as I say, the recycling rate's artificially low. If you get into comparisons of even things like paper bag costs, that could be misleading too, because different municipalities have different intentions for the revenue. Some towns charge a revenue specifically to equal the aggregate tipping fee. Some towns, well, Freeport, for instance, with this paper bag system at the transfer station, charges just for transportation. Some towns, like Cumberland, and I made reference to a conversation with the town manager there in a letter I wrote to you. Cumberland simply collects some amount of money, and it's not really, and the amount is not really related to any specific purpose. My conjecture is it's really a matter of, it's a political decision of Cumberland councilors deciding what their residents can stomach. But it's important to know that in Cumberland's case, for instance, the tipping fee or the revenue from the paper bag system does not cover the transportation cost. And that, in fact, there is an additional line item in Cumberland's budget to make up that difference. So again, just be cautious as you try to make comparisons from town to town. With regard to the uniqueness of Freeport, it's unusual that Freeport is operating a full service transfer station where everything except hazmat is accepted. It's unusual for Freeport that does not have a curbside recycling section to have recycling rates that are basically on par with towns that do have curbside recycling. And it's not unusual, it's probably unique that Freeport has 3 different methods for residents to dispose of their trash. What you all have mentioned already, whether it's Wentworth, whether it's Casella Pine Tree, or whether it's at the transfer station. I asked the finance department at Eco Maine to take a look at, this is public record, to take a look at the proportional amounts of trash brought by those 3 suppliers. And the answer has surprised everybody I've seen. Dan Wentworth is by far the largest hauler of trash from Freeport, moving more than 40% of the trash generated in Freeport taken down to Eco Maine's incinerator. The balance, a little less than 30% each, is pretty much equally distributed between Pine Tree and by the waste compacted at the transfer station. And this is the other surprise for so many people, that in fact, almost as much waste from Freeport goes through that transfer station as Casella Pine Tree moves. The transfer station is a really popular low-cost option for folks. And in this case, I'm not going to wear my objective hat. I'm just going to say that purely personally, I would, I've got a one-person household and I'm generating basically one bag of trash every 3 weeks or so. And I would hate to have to pay for a program that has a $250,000 or $300,000 truck with 2 operators stop by my place once every week, because it just isn't necessary and it's an unnecessary cost. As you go forward, again, in the note that I wrote, I mentioned some of the elements of the financial analysis that I think need to be considered further. But I hope that you all take a closer look at this, looking not only at the obvious savings that might be made from ceasing transportation costs for the compactor and for silver bullets, but also be warned that there is a strong possibility of introducing unintentionally a new and even substantial budget line, which is going to be dependent upon what the bag charge is. Using Adam's figures, or the town engineer's figures from last week, his estimate of a $250,000 hauling fee, I think that's probably, from what, again, I hear from my fellow board members at Eco Maine, I think that it may be a little high, but it's also pretty close to where I think it would land. These fees are all based on number of stops in town, and then I suppose internally to, in this case, Casella Pine Tree, the density of pickups along the route, the number of municipal miles, and then the distance to Eco Maine. But I think that the $250,000 or the $450,000 estimate that Adam made is probably, it's a good working number, a good conservative working number. But if that's the case, if you want the paper bag system to pay the entire transportation cost, you'll end up with bag costs substantially higher than any of the surrounding towns' charges are. And if you want to equal surrounding towns, then you'll be introducing a new budget item for basically the makeup. So I urge there be, as this goes forward, there be a more global consideration of the costs and revenues for any change in the current system. I also urge that, again, looking at the number of people who use the lowest cost option, just the paper bag at the transfer station, that however this discussion lands, there be some form of a low cost option like that retained. My personal thought is there may be some kind of a hybrid, which is possible. Again, since these contracts typically are a number of are based on number of stops, and a commercial hauler is not going to unload into his truck equipment that is not their own. It should be pretty easy to be able to keep track of the number of households where a commercial hauler would use your paper bag system, and then continue with the effectively paper bag at the transfer station too, for those who wish to manage their own household waste. But I tossed it just as a possibility, but I hope that, again, as this goes forward, that other options are considered other than a single town-wide contracted hauler. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rod. I appreciate that informed perspective, and also recognize that you were speaking there as an individual and a resident of Freeport, and not as our representative on the Eco Maine board. But it's precisely that perspective and knowledge and experience that you have, which lends a lot of credence to your perspective, which is why I wanted to have it presented. So we have a number, I just took a look, close to 30 people who are in the attendees section, some of which or all of which may want to speak. So let's see if we can get to that. And then, so for 20 or 30 minutes here, we'll see if we can contain the public comment to that kind of time frame. If needed, we could always go longer, and then the council can have a conversation about some of the input that we've been getting by email and by phone and by text message and smoke signal and everything else that we've been contacted with here over the past week. This will be the chance if anyone in the attendees column is wanting to speak on this particular issue, use the raise hand feature, and as I see some already.
Yep.
And the manager will recognize you and bring you over to the conversation, and we can have a dialogue. Please try and limit your comments to 3 minutes, since we have a number of people here. I want to make sure that we can hear from everybody. We don't have the annoying clock that's hanging up on the wall like we do at our council chambers, but please be courteous of others who wish to speak and limit your comments to 3 minutes, and we'll see how we do.
Okay, I'm usually doing, I'll name the next three as we go down. So I've got Jim Hughes as number 1, Jerry and June Edson number 2, and Shannon number 3. So I'll bring Jim over now. Hi, Jim, you're on.
Hey, hello, everybody. About 30 years ago, I was on the town's solid waste committee, and we knowingly made the decision at that point to keep the trash collection competitive among vendors. And I would encourage whatever we come up with here that there still be some options for competition. The best way to keep the prices low is to have competitors. Second thing, there was an item about the boxes. Every time I go to those recycling bins, there are several cartons that are not broke down. I would like to see us do something, put a sign up or something, or at least make a ruling that boxes must be broke down. That would take a problem, eliminate one of the problems that we have. Then as far as the recycling, it's called single source, which I've always had a problem with. It says single source, and you go, there's a whole list of things that it doesn't take. Well, that's not really single source. They're very limited in what can we put in those bins. But it would seem to me that some of the recycled materials like glass, cardboard, and paper may have value. Instead of having to pay to get rid of them, we should be selling them, especially cardboard. I know cardboard's always had a reasonable price. And I'm thinking that we probably ought to go back to the old method of having a couple of dumpsters, one for glass, one for cardboard, and one for everything else. I think that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Okay, so we've got Jerry and or June, Shannon, and Tim are 1, 2, 3. Okay, hi Jerry or June.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Good. No, this is Jerry Edson. Thank you for listening here. I am a little late to the game on this particular subject, but I did talk with Sarah Tracy on the phone this weekend, and she was extremely helpful in starting to get me caught up on what the considerations are here. I've gone through the materials that you all have had at previous meetings from the website, minutes and so forth. But again, as catch up, I could end up be missing a major point here. I've heard repeated a couple, 3 times what the goals here were. I mean, I started out coming from the point of view of saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I don't know if the goals that you all are trying to achieve represent something that really is broken and needs to be fixed. You know, reducing costs. I mean, the goals are very worthwhile. That's not the question. From my point of view, and I recognize I might be representing a really small minority of individuals when I divulged that my wife and I are in our late 70s, so we are elderly. We would be even further in a minority, perhaps, I don't know, maybe in rural Freeport. Our living situation, our house is at the end of a road that's a combination of dirt road and driveway that's 4/10 of a mile long. So getting the trash to the curbside is a little bit daunting on a weekly basis. I mean, I do the equivalent of that by the recycling that I do, taking recyclables to the transfer station. We do that. But the thought of taking our garbage can down to the road 4/10 of a mile, especially in the winter months, is a little bit daunting for somebody who's getting on in years like I am. There may be others in Freeport who think about the same type of thing. So there's an element of the level of service that Danny Wentworth provides that's important to us, and that is the element of coming to the house and picking up the trash. And so I know that's flying in the face of the whole concept of curbside, which is a key element in what you all are considering. I'll admit that part of my visceral reaction to this was out of loyalty, I guess, because I've been with Wentworth since 1982. And so there's a feeling of loyalty, but I think it's a two-way thing. The loyalty is, I mean, I don't go out and hang out with him on the weekends. It's not that kind of a friendship, but his level of service beyond just coming to the house to pick the trash up has been exemplary over all these years. It's just been fantastic.
Yeah.
So am I up to my 3 minutes? I hope not. But so that's the thing that I am lobbying for, is for the council to consider alternative ways depending on the needs of the individual customers, so that the level of service does not in fact degrade, because it would in our case just by having to haul the garbage to the curbside. The other element that I was somewhat concerned about maybe comes from my loyalty to Danny. As a small business owner, I haven't talked to Danny about this face to face, so I don't know. If an RFP were put out and bids were received and it required the bidder to do recycling, then that would say Danny would have a decision to make. He would have to decide that he was going to get into the recycling, or he is out. He would not be an eligible bidder. That seems a bit catastrophic to a person, a small business owner in Freeport, for the number of years that Wentworth have been in this town. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks very much, Jerry. And just to put you at ease, you are far from the minority in terms of the people that have spoken out about this. Your comments are quite aligned with many others that I've received.
Okay, so I've got Shannon and Tim, 1 and 2. So anybody else who is interested in speaking, feel free to queue up with the raise hand feature, and I'll put you in number 3. Hi, Shannon, you're back.
Hi, thank you again. I have not read all the paperwork that's out there. I'm just wondering if there's ever been any consideration to possibly having one of the days that the recycling center is open be a late night, because those to like 6 or 7, those of us who work a 9-to-5 job, it's impossible to get there during the week. And if you happen to have plans to go out of town, I get, my dog only barks when I'm talking to you. So anyway, if you happen to be have plans to go out of town, you can't go with your trash or recycle for a week or 2. And I know that the silver bullets are available, but and I live really, really close to one, and I've never actually gotten there and been able to put anything in because it's always full. And I understand it gets taken away. I think people hide along the side and wait for it to be empty and then rush and put everything in it. So just I would suggest looking at possibly having one night a week that it's open late, that gives more flexibility for people to go and recycle, and not to go recycle and drop off their trash. If I would say once a week, but even if it's once a month or something like that, because it really is limiting with only having Saturdays on the weekend for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Mr. Chair, could I just chime in there for 1 second? Thanks, Shannon. I did read that in your email earlier today, as well as the tree. We'll get that looking at. The question, that's a very good point, and something that's kind of on our radar right now about hours at the transfer station. We're kind of stuck in this, I think, middle ground as we try to figure out what the long-term recycling and solid waste options are here in the town, because staffing levels at the transfer station, if we continue as our currently, or if we expand, we'll need to increase staffing up there. But that's not something that Adam and I, or even anybody thought was a good idea to do if there was a chance that operations up there might reduce. So that is something that's very much on the radar to look at and analyze. It's just kind of like this catch-22. We don't want to bring somebody on to expand transfer station hours and budget for that, and then decide that the council wants to go in a curbside direction and have to basically let that person go. But that is a pretty good point. Thank you, Shannon. That's something that's on the radar to look at when we figure out what we're doing. Okay, I've got Tim up next, and then Greg and Nick and/or Amanda. Hi, Tim.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Tim Dowdy. I'm at 231 Flying Point Road. I've had Danny Wentworth for over 25 years, and I just can't get over the type of service that guy provides. And I don't want to see that go away. I'll admit that I haven't been up on this issue, and I do trust the town council to do what you think is the best thing to do. But I have a 650-foot driveway. I'm 64 years old. I do not really look forward to the task of dragging a couple of boxes down to the end of the driveway every week. I think the service that Dan provides is phenomenal, really. And I don't know if it happens in other towns, but it certainly is pretty special in this town. I don't get a chance to talk to Danny that often, but when I do, it's always entertaining. And I trust him. I like that he's in my driveway every week. And I just don't want to see anything happen that would do away with that service. And that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tim. Your comments are widely shared by a lot of Danny's customers.
Okay, I've got Greg coming over next, and then followed by Nick or Amanda, Nick and Amanda, and then Deidre. Hi, Greg, you're on.
Hi, folks. I very much appreciate the opportunity to echo some of the other folks' comments with regard to the service that we've received by Danny Wentworth. We're relative newcomers. We've only had him for about 10 years now, by comparison to some of the other folks. We live at the foot of Dixon Road next to the Yacht Club. And I'm not sure what defines curbside, but I suspect that curbside would probably be Harrisecret Road versus a truck coming all the way down to the bottom of Dixon Road to turn around and go back up for our trash. Currently, Danny does that. My wife and I are both in our 70s, and if we're very ambitious on a perfect day, we can march up and down the hill. In the wintertime, it's probably something that we're not that excited about doing, especially if we're each toting a garbage can. So I would simply echo the sentiments of others that Danny is providing a service to a number of us, and we would hate to see that go.
Thanks very much, Greg. Appreciate the comments.
Okay. Got Nick and/or Amanda. Hi, how are you? Next, I've got queued up Deidre and Lydia.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
We're fairly new to Freeport, unlike the other callers or commenters. We lived in Portland for 35 years and moved to Freeport, bought our building 5 years ago and physically moved to our house about 2 years ago. And I just wanted to comment on when Portland went to pay per bag situation, and a little bit about our experience from going from that to here. When we first moved here, we hired Casella Pine Tree for our shop over on Route 1 and for our tenant to use. and everything was fine. They picked up, they did the recycling. It's Route 1. There's no problem. When we moved into our house, which we're down off of Lambert Road on Crow's Nest, which is a dirt circle that feeds 3 to 4 different houses. And we immediately just hired Casella because that's what we knew about, and that was fine. We had nothing but trouble with them coming around our dirt drive in the wintertime. And then in dealing with them to complain that trucks weren't coming around, we put the garbage out and nobody would pick it up. And they were like, oh, well, the road was unpassable. And we were like, but it was plowed. You know, they do, Wendy, and they do a really good job, Dodge does, in plowing our area. And so we finally told them we wanted to cancel their service because we weren't being serviced. And then it created about 3 months of bills keeping coming and trying to get them to take things off the bill when they hadn't actually serviced us. And it just was a pain in the you know where. And our neighbors said, well, why aren't you using Wentworth? And we were like, what? And they're like, yeah, Danny Wentworth. And so we contacted him. And I cannot say, again, we're the newest user of Wentworth's, but you know, he leaves us notes and he's considerate. And if we haven't put the garbage out, he'll come down our 300-foot drive and say, hey, you got some garbage for us? And it reminds me of what I love about being in Freeport, that I feel like a part of a community that cares about everything. And I agree, it's great to look at it and to consider different options. But from my experience, when Portland went to pay per bag, my neighbor was so pissed off that he first started pulling the paper bags around his large garbage can so they couldn't be pulled off. And he would put that out. And because they couldn't really pull the bag off easily, the garbage collectors, they would just dump the garbage in. And then he started getting maggots and things around his bag that he was using over and over and over again. And then, because he was so pissed off, he hired a dumpster to have at the end of our road so that he and his tenants could throw bags in without having to pay for the bags. It's an emotional issue for a lot of people. And with Portland, we would recycle in the recycle bin. But here in Freeport, you know, we've had to take our recycling to the transfer station or to one of the bullets. And we used the South Freeport one when we first moved here and really appreciated that and felt it was convenient. Now it's less convenient and our recycling piles up until my husband has a whole, van load full, and then we go to the recycle place. But that's really my experience, and I would hate to see, you know, Danny is far more reasonable than Casella. My experience was that they could not service us where we are, and that I worry about pay per bag, pay as you go, just because of my experience in Portland being so horrific with my neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate the comments and the comparison to your other experiences.
Okay, I've got Deidre and Lydia up next.
Is that okay? Did I do okay?
Hey, Deidre, you're on.
Hi there. It's actually Peter. Deirdre signed up but drifted
hey.
off.
Hi.
Like most people in Freeport, we are big believers in what's good for the community is good for all of us. So doesn't matter what I think about a mask, even though I like them, we all wear masks because it's good for the community. Recycling is good for the community, and there are lots of ways to make more recycling. For us, one of the best ones is what we do, which is ask Danny, can we send, no, you can't send that with me, you got to take it special waste, or no, you can't recycle it, or no, you can, or yes, you should send it with me. So I think someone said during the early presentations there are better ways to get communication out there, interns, whatever, you're going to have a hard time finding somebody better than Danny. And putting aside the incredible convenience that he provides, not having to haul your trash down to the foot of the road, and the incredible service just generally, I don't think this is a community issue. I think rather it's a example of that sort of tired old, I think Reagan era joke. I'm here from the government and I'm here to help you. So I encourage you to, before going with a single person that we all got to use, think about whether this is really one of those cases where that's the only way to serve the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate your comments.
Hey, I've got Lydia next. Hi, Lydia, you're on.
Hi, thank you. I just had to get unmuted. My name's Lydia Viator, and my husband and I moved to Freeport almost 2 years ago. We were coming from Portland and we were using their pay per bag system, and we were paying about $3 per bag for the 30-gallon bags. That's a considerable amount more than we're paying right now. We are customers with Dan Wentworth, and I would just echo all the other sentiments about his, great customer service and convenience. But on top of that, the price is really affordable for us. So on top of that, I mean, this is a relatively picky issue, but with the pay per bag system, you don't get to choose your own kitchen bags as well. So, nothing's worse than paying $3 for a garbage bag and having it rip, which is something that we were experiencing before. But on top of that, knowing that my husband and I are relatively new to the community, and what I'm hearing is that the desire is to increase recycling within the community to reduce the overall costs at the end result, regardless of how the trash and recycling reaches the collection center. We haven't seen any sort of educational materials about recycling or any sort of recycling campaign. We might have missed that, but I guess my question really is, if the goal is to increase recycling participation, what kind of educational materials or campaigns has the town initiated to increase that recycling at the individual level, perhaps without having to overhaul the entire system? Earlier in the presentation, interns and educational materials were mentioned as part of the overall idea. So is that a piece of the plan that could be utilized without having to kind of force everybody's hand into a pay per bag system to still achieve the lowered trash and increased recycling rate to get that cost down?
Thank you, Lydia. I'm particularly sharply aware of the lack of education and community discussion we've had on a broad sense. There's been lots of efforts from a number of environmental groups, as well as representatives from Eco Maine, who have come to our community and held workshops and evening events. And we've had information boards out at the recycling containers that have been positioned in various places in the community. But we need a whole lot more. And if nothing else, the amount of contamination in the recycling containers proves that people are still trying to figure out what to put in and what not to put into those containers. So I would agree with you completely. I don't think you've missed any broad sweeping efforts. I think they've been good intention, but not broadly executed across the entire community, which is something that's become sharply illustrated for me in the past week here about just how much more education and information we need to conduct. But thank you, and I appreciate your perspective on that. And it's 2 years late, but welcome to our community.
Well, thank you. And my husband and I could be a lot better about recycling, and we know that. I don't think we knew that it was such a concern within the community, but we'd, welcome any sort of educational efforts to help us on that. At the same time, we really like our current service with Dan.
Great.
John, do you know if Eco Maine is still doing its advertising campaign on all the major television stations?
I don't know. I don't know. Peter, you might know, or Adam. I don't know if you know about what. I don't really watch TV, so I don't know what's on there or not.
Not off the top of my head, John.
Yeah. Our sustainability, Lydia, if you're still listening, our sustainability committee has education and community information as one of its core values as well. So there very well may be an opportunity if you had some ideas and potentially wanted to contribute, there might be a vehicle there to help participate. And I know that the committee has brought that subject forward, including last year, arranging to have some interns stationed throughout the community. It was a small effort, but I think it made some impact. And if we were to try and do that on a larger scale, it may require some resources, but there's nothing like having somebody at the container helping you identify what works and what doesn't work in the recycling container.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I'll reach out to see how I can help.
Thank you.
All right, we are through the long queue of 10 plus people for public comment, Mr. Chair.
No, you're not. You got Joyce.
We were through. Oh, we've got Joyce and Ken. Anybody else? Well, now we don't have Ken anymore. Ken, if you want to speak, make sure to raise your hand. All right, Joyce is our Joyce, and then Ken's on deck.
I just had to do that to you, Peter, because you said we were through.
People are doing this intentionally now. I see how it is.
Just because we like you.
Good evening, Joyce.
Good evening. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of my mother, who unfortunately couldn't be here because she's stuck in Arizona because of the virus. But her mother had Danny Wentworth. So we've had his service in our family. We had his father's service in our family also. And I think it's obvious from the number of people that his little flyer touched. Maybe if we do an educational thing, we should have Danny distribute some of them.
Yeah.
Danny comes to the door. My mother lives on a small road. She is 95. She can put her garbage out right at her door and he picks it up. If there is no garbage there, when he comes around to our house, he will ask. He will stop and knock on my door and ask if my mother is okay. That is a service that is beyond anything to me. And we're not going to get that from any of the large companies that might bid for a townwide program. Education is needed. A lot of us that have Danny are very good about recycling and take our things to the Silver Bullet or the transfer station. And I think it's just more than about recycling and cost to the town. I think service is a big portion of it and needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.
Hey, got Ken on deck and then nobody else. So whoever wants to queue up next to mess me up when I say we're all done, feel free to do so after Ken. Hi, Ken, you're on.
Once you unmute.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hey, we hear you.
Good. Danny Wentworth has been Wentworth Rubbish Removals. They've been picking up my rubbish for me since we were successful in helping him and Frank Waterman with the charter amendment that you see in the town charter, which calls for no paper bags, no user fee, no new tax relating to the tipping fees at RWS. So I did receive, and it was alluded to earlier by the chairman, a note from Danny, which I'd like to read to you all. It says, "Save my business. Wentworth Rubbish Removal has been providing trash removal services for Freeport since 1967. The company was started by my father, and I took over in 1982, 38 years ago. We have always specialized in house-to-house pickup. On August 18, 2020, the town engineer will make a presentation to the town council that outlines a single hauler, paper bag, town-wide waste collection program. This proposal will increase the property tax mill rate and put the town in a trash hauling business, or they will bid off trash hauling to a large company. My company provides door-to-truck service, and we are honored to know our customers. This proposal will end my company. Please let your town councilors know. This was sent out by Danny Wentworth. I'm sure some of you have seen it. I thought it was important that we put that into the record for those who may not know about it. So why would Danny think that these discussions might put him out of business? Well, if you look specifically at the flyer that was done or provided by the town engineer, it talks about an option to have the town purchase collection trucks and frames, the bid specifications around town-wide equipment, or provide the services themselves through employed labor and capital investment. Waste collection trucks are estimated to cost $300,000 over a 10 to 20 year depreciation schedule and require 2 additional full-time staffs, estimated an annual cost of $120,000, including salary and benefits. And if you look further on the report from the town engineer, it says any collected recyclables moved away from the transfer station to curbside collection method would likely have a negative effect on the contamination rates. So I think it's important that we step back and start to rule out some of these ideas. That's my input. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you, Ken. I just want to clarify, and I believe Adam might want to clarify as well, that the components of that proposal that you just read was an identification of one potential option. It was never identified as a preferred option. It was just to provide data and background for the council to consider among a range of options. We didn't do a good job communicating that, and that it was just one of a potential range. And it was certainly not a proposal originated by the town engineer. So I apologize on behalf of the town for miscommunicating that and how it was put out. We should have clarified that it was just one of many potential options that we may look at. And the discussion this evening is giving pretty clear evidence about the town's, at least the folks attending here, their opinion about whether or not we make any changes. So Adam, did you want to add something to that?
If I may, something I learned in school was it's when you communicate something, it's not necessarily what you're showing them, but what you aren't. You have to consider what you aren't showing them, and correctly so that I did not clarify in my memo that I was not recommending we go to the town purchase their own truck. The unwritten message there was it's just an option available to all of us. I think I will conclude my comment with, I believe where we left off at the last meeting, right before the power cut out, was my statement that Danny provides excellent customer service and we have no interest in putting him out of business. We want him to compete. Now, that's another discussion down the road on how that occurs, but we very much like Danny and have no interest in displacing local hauler business.
Thanks, Adam. Ken, thanks very much for your comments this evening. Having former counselors and getting that perspective is very valuable.
Okay, we've got Pam and Tim both up, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And then that's it. Now that I've said that, somebody else will add their name, I'm sure. Hi, Pam.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Oh, thanks. Just a quick, round of applause for Danny because we've used him for 3 years. One anecdote. Shortly after I moved here, there was some holiday and I just assumed that there was no trash collection. And so I put it out the next day thinking, okay, it'll be collected, and it didn't get collected. And so I called him up and he was like, oh, no, 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 no. I take off like 2 days a year. And he came back around that day, not on my trash collection day, to get my trash. And I don't have a lot. It could have waited another week. So there's that. Also, for anybody who's still on, the Hunter Road Fields Silver Bullet, I find, is usable Wednesday afternoons. There's my hint for the day. Please don't now totally fill it up before I get there tomorrow. So thanks.
Now you've ruined it for everyone who uses it on Wednesday afternoon, Pam.
I waited until I heard there were only like 30 people on the call before sharing that.
Down to 27. There's hope, maybe.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Tim D, coming back over.
I just wanted to reiterate or go back over my previous comments. Tim Dowdy, Flying Point Road. Danny has been great, and I will say that I just heard about this today from my brother-in-law who lives next door, and I hadn't been solicited by Danny or ever talked to him about this, and I didn't want to give you the impression that he was generating input. He certainly has the right to, but I just made my comments based on my 25 years of experience with his service that he provides, and I just wanted to make clear that this was all on my own, and nobody asked me to do anything in this regard, and I just wanted to make that clear. I support Danny, I support his services, and I'd like to see him continue until I die. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim.
I'll let somebody else say what's going on in the attendees column with the hands.
Holly has her hand up.
There's none of them up.
But Valerie.
Oh no, Joe Migliaccio. I swear people are just messing with me now. Joe, you're on. Hi.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I was just messing with you because you said nobody's on. I just wanted to jump in and say thanks for posting the statistics, looking at everything. As you know, I was up here last year speaking about the additional travel, fuel burn, and everything when we were moving the silver bullets. The data continues to me show that Freeport is very diligent and a great high performer and responsible citizens by continuing without regulation, having inline recycling rates and less contamination rates. So I was just curious if you guys had any insights as to how the needles moved in the last year since the silver bullets have been changed. Have you seen a change in recycling rates up or down? But again, great job, Freeport. I don't think we need the regs. We're doing a good job.
Yeah, overall recycling rate, contamination percentage down, recycling rate pretty steady. We attribute that to people started listening to the numerous repeated comments by this group and that were sent out in the mail, and the educational, the interns and employees that were stocking the silver bullets, telling people what they could and couldn't throw out. So all those things contributed to the contamination rate going down, I think. I've got Vali's hand up as well, sorry. Over here. Go ahead,
So thank you. And listening to all the comments that the public just presented, it occurred to me that we didn't share with you in the beginning some of the research that we've done around the ways in which the collection happens in municipalities that do offer municipal collection of the curb. Some communities divide the town in different zones to accommodate for a competitive bidding process for small and large haulers, so that small haulers can bid for one zone. A big hauler may decide to bid for a 3 or 4 zone, so that you can tailor your bid to your size, the size of your operation. The other thing that's noteworthy is that even the large haulers have trucks the size of Danny Wentworth. They're called single purpose trucks, and they are used for either recycling or trash. So even Pine Tree Casella, which services our town, does have access to smaller trucks that can go down smaller streets than the ones that they currently do. The ones that are circulating in Freeport at the moment are dual purpose trucks, and they actually do the recycling and the trash collection at the same time. So in one stop, they simultaneously collect both, but that need not be the case, especially if you have one hauler who does only trash and you need to complement with one who does only recycling. That is an option that is used by other municipalities. The other option that is offered by even some of the larger outfits like Pine Tree is for an additional fee. They will send someone from the truck, either the operator or the person sitting next to the operator, down to the garage of someone who may be elderly, infirm, or unable to bring the trash and the bin to the curb. So that is something to consider along, because there's so many people who have expressed an interest in still having that door-to-door service. So there are a myriad of ways that if you choose to go forward with this discussion and get to the point of considering RFPs, that you can tailor your RFP to what the community wants and needs. And what I'm hearing from the community is that they do clearly want to give an opportunity for a fair chance to the small local haulers to continue to participate and service the town. You can even just give preferential treatment to local people or people with small trucks or people who do long driveways, or however you write it, you can just respond to the needs and the desires of the residents that you're currently hearing from.
Thanks, Folly. Peter, any other hands up on the attendees list?
Yep, we've got Kate Rosenfeld. Hey, Kate.
Hi again. I just thank you again. I just wanted to follow up with a couple of comments. I did think it was interesting when I was preparing for this evening to look again at the town engineer's memo. I think it really covers a lot of good information. And one of the real standouts is that just to keep in mind that if I understand it, what we're now spending, all of us, on hauling, we could do a curbside program for trash and recycling for the same or less. So that's if I'm right about that interpretation. So it's just, again, I think just that's why it's just worth looking at. It seems like a responsible thing to do fiscally and environmentally. I also want to point out, I also am a real fan of Dan Wentworth. He is also our hauler, and he is superb, just the best. And I think personally, and when I was a member of the Sustainability Committee, I felt everyone hoped and would want Dan to be a part of this going forward. I think Rod made a very good point about how different communities, you can't kind of compare different communities directly. And I think this is an example where we might want to create something in Freeport where we have kind of a hybrid situation that works for us. And in looking at these 14 other communities, I was just curious, what are they doing? How are they managing these rising costs and the environmental issues and economic issues? And you do see a theme there, curbside and pay as you throw. Within that though, there is a lot of variability, and you can see that different towns are doing kind of their own thing that clearly works for that community. For instance, some still have, even though they offer a municipal curbside program with pay as you throw, their transfer station is still open. You can still bring your things there. As far as bag fees, some towns like Durham, they don't do bags. Some people are really annoyed by bags. They do tags instead. And so you don't have to use somebody else's bag. You tag it. And they give out 26 free tags a year for garbage to their residents. So that's an example of a much lower fee for trash. There's a hybrid system operational in West Bath, for instance, that uses, has a municipal curbside recycling program, but private haulers for curbside trash pickup. They also have pay as you throw at the transfer station. So I guess I'm just bringing those examples up just to say that other communities, there are general principles at work, but not, as Rod was saying, not everyone has the exact same needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Appreciate your comments. Peter, any other hands up?
Nope, not right now.
Okay.
It might change.
Yeah, I know we've had more than 45 minutes of public comment here, so hopefully that's enough time for folks to chime in. We do have one other item on our agenda to talk about, so I want to be mindful of getting to that item as well. But Peter, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, well, are we done with, I think we're done with public input, right? I don't want to jump over. I want to hear what everybody else has to say. So if we're back to discussion at this point. Oh, you're muted, John. John, you're mute.
Somebody else, John, pops up their hand. We could give them 3 minutes, but we need to bring it back up to the council for discussion here.
So as a little background, I don't know if we've ever made this clear, and I should do that because I probably have some responsibility to do that because I've started a lot of this conversation in the first place. Like some other people had said, I'm in the boat where, I live close to the transfer station, take my trash there and have a long driveway. So I'm probably the person who would benefit the least from this kind of an arrangement financially and convenience wise. So I was the least disposed to looking at, curbside townwide. I figured everybody that had it, everybody that wanted it already had it, and all the rest of us that don't take their stuff. But we started looking at the numbers. Adam, Josh, Kate, Josh Olins, Kate Rosenfeld from the Sustainability Committee can kind of confirm this. We started looking, maybe it was like a year ago now, maybe even longer. We started looking at the numbers. I was not particularly fond of an idea like this, looking at it. But then when we saw the numbers, the cost, comparisons, I really changed my mind and, thought we should move forward with at least bringing some of this discussion to the town council. The reason had nothing to do, and I think this may have been lost on pretty much everybody, but it had nothing to do with Wentworth's hauling, which is the vastly more affordable of the two options in town. When you look at the annual, we looked at broke out the monthly costs or the yearly cost per person in Adam's memo. We're going off of rough numbers, $15 a month for a Wentworth customer and 50 to 60 for a Pine Tree customer. Those are kind of what are reported back to us. I don't know how accurate, dead on accurate those are for the current time, but those are kind of the ranges we're talking about. And then you look at what other towns do with their curbside recycling, both trash and recycling pickup, and they're doing it for comparable or maybe even lower rates. I don't know if we would get those same rates here in Freeport if we bid it, but comparable to what Wentworth does. So we're saying, okay, clearly Wentworth has good service, as people can have attested here, and they're in the right price range. That makes sense. That's a winning business model. But why would somebody pay 3 to 4 times as much to go with what we are kind of hearing from people? Maybe the satisfaction level is less. I don't know. I don't deal with them, but we had a couple comments tonight that pointed in that direction. And pretty much the answer that we came to is that because people either can't bring their own trash and recycling and want curbside, and they want recycling pickup as well, and or they can't bring it. They want the convenience of having both of them at the same time. So that's kind of what, at least our running hypothesis. Anybody that can prove that wrong from Pine Tree, just let us know, that uses Pine Tree service. I mean, not from Pine Tree. But the specific issue never was and is not still that there's any lack of service or price, unfairness with Wentworth customers. But that's kind of what's attracted everyone's attention to it at this point, and Dan's attention to it as well. So it hit me like a ton of bricks or a ton of pay-as-you-throw bags, I guess, as we were sitting here listening to the conversation tonight, that the problem possibly, we may have misframed the problem, and the problem may not be replacing garbage collection, meaning MSW trash collection, with a single hauler, because we have 2 options for that already. Perhaps what we should look at that we haven't done is providing an option or universal throughout town recycling pickup. We have not run those numbers, but imagine a scenario where we, as Kate just described, either contract or however we do it. I'm not trying to bring it in-house to get to Ken Mann's concerns. That's not something that I think we want to do, but that's, just use that as a cost comparison. You could have a single purpose truck, hopefully contracted through a contract with the town, that went and provided universal around town recycling pickup, that would then take away the drive for people to feel like they have to pay $60 or $50 a month to get both of them. And then they could contract with the trash hauler of their choosing. That's an option that we have not floated or investigated financially, but I think that would provide an avenue that would not let us pick sides on trash haulers.
Councilor Tracy?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Peter. I mean, I think part of the difficulty is we're trying to solve one problem and we're wrapping in another problem, or we're creating another problem. And so I would be very interested in that analysis. I mean, there's the difficulty with that is that you don't have a decrease. When you were looking at the first analysis, you had an increase in taxes associated with the townwide service, but then you had a decrease in your bill because you were no longer paying a private hauler. I think conceptually what you're talking about, which is a recycling only service, is conceptually cleaner. It doesn't have the value of, you can take down your private side bill because nobody's paying for, well, I guess only the Casella people are paying, or Pine Tree are paying for recycling right now, but we've seen that that's only 30% of the town. I guess, but that being said, I think that does make a lot of sense to look at that service, and in the vein of offsetting costs, if the goal is to get convenient recycling and it becomes curbside throughout town, then arguably we can get rid of the silver bullets, which it wasn't mentioned earlier, but one of the issues is contamination. The other issue is it just gets filled up with uncompacted recycling, and it's just darn right inefficient and kind of a waste of money. Which was my beef when we were looking at it. It's convenient, but it doesn't make sense environmentally or sort of from a space perspective. So the increase in costs from curbside recycling could potentially be offset by reducing some of the costs associated with hauling silver bullets from West Street 5 times a week and from the public.
The old 3-sided stool, you can get it done fast, get it done cheap, or get it done right. You can pick 2, right? The cheap part is, you're right, falls out of that equation, I think. But maybe it's closer to something that's stomachable though. And I don't think that maybe it's closer and a better solution than what we have now, even if it costs a little bit more and it's more convenient for the residents who then don't have to go to the Silver Bullets or don't have to, even somebody like Shannon who can look out the window almost and see it, doesn't have to, try to time it correctly. I agree with everybody
Right,
else.
it just comes to the end of your driveway.
I've
And
never
then if you
found
don't
an
want to
empty
bring
one
it to
either.
the
So, yep.
I'll just reflect, and I really would like to hear from my fellow counselors that an overwhelming, compelling theme of the comments that I've received in the past week, which is over 200 if I'm adding emails to phone calls and text messages. An overwhelming theme of those comments has been that many residents, many of those 200 or over 200 that contacted me, like having a private business which they can do business with, and are resistant to any required or mandatory curbside. So and that's largely, or maybe not, but somewhat at least influenced by the reaction to that was miscommunicated about what we may or may not be doing this evening. But that's still a compelling argument that people, many residents don't want the town getting involved in trash. And we have that, we haven't spoken about it this evening, but it's a part of our charter that the town does not get into the trash business. So I'm mindful of not stepping in that hole. So I think we have a long way to go before we were to propose any sort of town required or town mandated curbside service, whether it's recycling or trash or both, because I think there's a wide gap in understanding about what we're trying to do and what the town is interested in doing. Councilor Lawrence.
Yeah, I think the issue is recycling. It's not the trash pickup. What I got, because I got many calls, a lot of them from, almost all of them from Danny's customers, they all like choice. And that's what, I think we have choice. We don't, as soon as you lose the choice, you start creating monopoly, and that creates all kinds of other problems. They like Danny's service. I asked them if they recycled it. All of them said they recycled. Most of them go to the transfer station. So, I mean, that's not scientific. Those are just people that called me. He's 40%. If 40% of the town is recycling, then what are we doing to get the message out? Why don't we recycle? Maybe we could put a recycle rate board like they do for fundraising, put it at the town council. Hey, our rate this week was this. Let's see if we can get it up to here. I kind of like the easy solutions. I also think that maybe we extend or try, we don't have to do it on a full-time basis, but maybe for the rest of the summer, extending the hours, approving overtime, whatever we need to do, extend the hours at the transfer station so people can get there after work. My wife works till 4 o'clock, so it's Saturday when we take all our trash over there. I work till 4:35, and then I've got other things going on. But if we increase the amount of hours at the transfer station, I think we might get more recycling. It might go down. It was interesting. Rod said we have an artificially low recycling rate, and talking to people today, I find that kind of hard to believe, just because everybody I asked said that they were recycling, and we recycle. And I think Freeport in general is very mindful of recycling and keeping the environment clean.
Councilor Riley.
I grew up as a small town resident and grew up with the philosophy in government that services are provided when there isn't an adequate means of doing the same thing privately. And so government services then were added, and then your taxes went up along with it. Where we have a private means, that's one thing. And if it's being adequately met, I believe that it is. It is the desire of the Sustainability Committee, that's what I hear is the desire of the Sustainability Committee, to increase our recycling of materials. But that's a desire. That's not necessarily a lacking of what we're doing right now. I believe that the education piece is something that we can involve ourselves in to get more and more people as part of this. I know that last year Eco Maine did a lot of advertising on the local television stations during the morning news cycle. So that was very, very prevalent. It's a case of, given the chance for recycling, where we have a private hauler in Pine Tree or whoever else it may be named after, and this contamination rate is 25%. And that's still, it's us as the people who are putting the things in the quote unquote proper containers that aren't getting it right. It's not Pine Tree, it's the consumer who really doesn't care. And so the contamination rate goes higher. That probably would continue on if we were doing a curbside pickup. So I think education's one piece and going from there. The other component that was brought up by sustainability was in composting. We already have garbage to garden available to us to pick up our compost and turn it around and bring it back. We've already had a program where we had discounted on composting containers that you could pick up from the transfer station. I think we still have a few of those composting containers available for purchase. So I mean, there are lots of things that we can do, and we don't necessarily have to get involved in the town being the recyclable unit. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Councilor Whitney, you had a comment?
Yes, I too, John, have had, and I apologize for all those of you who I have not gotten back to. I tried to at least be brief and respond to as many emails as I could, but in my time, I've never received the volume of passion that we have received over this subject. And I was able to talk with a lot of people and ask them if they were to remove Danny from the equation, because again, most of them are customers of his. If they were to remove him from the equation, would this still be something that they were concerned with, or or is it their relationship with him? And they all agreed that even if you removed him, they want to make their own choices. And that's what they love about Freeport. And so I feel like that was loud and clear amongst everybody. A lot of them are older and made the point that it's hard for them to get their containers up to the driveway. I heard that in email. We heard that tonight. So I do think that increasing the hours at the transfer station, even opening up the gift shop, everybody, remember that fun place? Mm-hmm. Would help. And so I think, that's what we're hearing. And I'm grateful to have heard from so many people today and over the last week.
Councilor Pilch.
So I think Freeport's really lucky to have Danny Wentworth in his service. It sounds like a lot of people are speaking out in favor of him for good reasons. Elderly folks with long driveways, private drives. Not a lot of towns have that option. I don't think anyone has spoken in favor of getting rid of Danny Wentworth. Nobody that I've heard on the council, at the town level, or on the sustainability board has said we should get rid of Danny Wentworth. So it's nice to have that kind of consensus and direction going forward. I also note that nobody spoke in favor of Casella, saying, hey, we love them and they're fantastic. My hunch is there are a lot of reluctant customers of Casella because they offer curbside recycling. I know that was certainly the case for us in our previous house here in Freeport. We wanted to have curbside recycling for the convenience of it, and that was the only option. So we went with it, even though it was 2 to 3 times the cost of Danny's service. So I think there's an unspoken sentiment here that might be worth reaching out to and trying to get some feedback from all the folks who maybe are using Pine Tree, but reluctantly so. And I think it's worth noting, and this, forgive me if this is repetitive, but also check me if I'm accurate here, but the town, through a line item on our budget, is paying for all of the waste that we send to Eco Maine, regardless of who brings it there. Whether it's Danny or whether it's dropped at the transfer station or whether Casella brings it, we all share in that cost, and that's in our chart.
That's correct.
Can't change that. So anything we divert from that stream, composting, reduction overall, comes out of our budget. Anything that we divert to recycling is half of the cost of, more or less half of the cost of the waste that we send over. So townwide, it's in our best interest to try and reduce the amount of solid waste we send wherever we send it, Eco Maine in this case. So curbside recycling seems like a way we might be able to increase that. And if we can do that in conjunction with keeping the service that we have from Danny and whatever other options want to come into town and get licensed to do so, that sounds like something we should pursue. And I think this has been brought up before, but maybe that's something, and it looks like West Bath does something similar where they have municipal curbside recycling, but private options for trash. So basically the trash can stay the same and we offer additional options for curbside recycling. So that's something I'd like to see us look into.
That's another permutation for sure. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Councillor Horn.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said, Councillor Pilch. And I, like everybody else, I got plenty of emails, calls from constituents who really love Danny's service. My 82-year-old mother is one of those. And I think we do have a situation in this town where we have to make sure that the services that Danny provides can be preserved. But it does come down to recycling. I think what's bothered me really since we pulled the silver bullet out of the South Freeport Village, but even before that, is that to have curbside recycling in this town, it costs a fortune. It's hundreds of dollars, and it really does force our townspeople to into these other recycling activities, which I applaud our townspeople for doing them as well as they do. But it is an inconvenience. I mean, people's garages fill up with this stuff. You heard it tonight from others. And so there's a service that's not getting performed right now, to pick up on Councilor Riley's point. I mean, at some point, if a service isn't provided, then we need to examine that. I think I favor a private solution to this for the trash for sure. I'd be open to a public recycling solution potentially. But I'm also interested in one of the things that pops into my head is, education works in terms of helping people understand what they should recycle and what they shouldn't. But there's another thing that works pretty well, and that's market forces. And if it costs you more to throw something away than it does to recycle it, in other words, if you have say bag tags or a assigned number of bags, it forces the consumer in some ways to do their best to reduce what they're generating for waste. So the education piece helps, but just having a market force, sort of that invisible hand, helping people say, well, maybe I'll recycle that because if I put it in here, I have to go buy more bags. I like the elegance of that. And I think that's why so many surrounding communities in some way or another, and really all over the country, favor some kind of mechanism which unleashes the market forces in a paper bag system. So I'm open to some kind of a hybrid mix. I want to see Danny's system survive. I think it would be fantastic if a Wentworth operation or others and other small players, if we can entice smaller haulers to do rubbish and recycling services. I think we should examine RFPs. I think we should sit down with Danny and say, what would it take? What kind of what do the numbers look like for you? I think we should do all those things. I think we have, and everyone I talk to on this issue, once they realize that, we weren't trying to run Danny out of business, I think people do want to do the right thing. And I think they want to recycle as much as they can. So I'll leave it at that, but those are my thoughts for the moment.
You're muted, but I guess you talk to me.
Yeah,
we do have this.
Council Lawrence.
we do have the service, and it's called the transfer station. You know, you have, it's inconvenient. So now what we're talking about is making it convenient. And then we're doing artificial things like, okay, you can buy for bag. That's not really a market force. That's the government saying, hey, you got to pay for this to get it out of here. So I have a lot of heartburn with those kind of things, because it's the government forcing the people to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. But I don't think that's the case here. I think what we need to do is make it personal for everybody, and try to do it. I like to use a carrot, not a stick, you know, and if we can make it educational and make it show people what it does for us. Right now, we don't. We absolutely do not show anybody. I was surprised most of the callers called because Dan sent out his note, because until that happened, it hadn't been on anybody's radar. And even though we weren't trying to put him out of business, that was a potential, and that was mentioned in the memo. But if we can make it personal and show people, hey, if we do this, this is what can happen, I think we get a much better turnaround, or not turnaround, but we get more participation in, oh, look, this is why we're doing this, instead of government's telling me I got to do this. That doesn't work in all kinds of ways.
Just to push back on that just for a second, I'm not saying it's a market force or it's a market mechanism that can help people. You can just throw the stuff out if you want. It's just going to cost you more. That's all. That's a market force.
Okay, but it's a stick. It's not a carrot, and that's
one of the things we can. One of the things we can do is we know that, quote unquote, there may be a need, and if there's a need there at this time where people are underemployed, there's a business opportunity to be created. And maybe that's something that we need to do is to see how that goes. Even to the fact, if we picked up all recycling and took it, a private person picked it all recycling and took it to the transfer station, could the transfer station handle it? And, you know, do we regulate the cost that way? You know, Danny has a fee structure that somebody else could do exactly the same thing on a fee structure per stop, and it may be viable for those people who are out there that are using the bigger carrier that provides both. Maybe we need to entertain bids on this.
Thank you all. I'd like to make a suggestion that perhaps the vice chair and I can work with the manager and the engineer and come up with a more extensive rather than less extensive list of potential pathways or avenues that we might address this issue, so that we can then get some consensus from the council to direct back to the sustainability board to do some research. That's our committee that will dig up the data and find out more information about the items that we're talking about this evening. We've heard a lot of different scenarios tonight, and we've heard a number of different carrots and a number of different sticks and a number of different permutations of what we can do about trash hauling. Overriding all of that is the language that's in our town charter right now, which we all have to be mindful of as well. So if that is acceptable, then by our next meeting, we could circulate for another other business item, a list of, you know, however many it might come up to, that we can then rank in terms of what we'd like to learn more about. So just trying to distill this down. I'm also interested in really hearing a lot more about what we can do to get the public involved in this issue and have some more information sharing across the community, so that it doesn't have to rely on a particular vendor putting a note in his customer's service package, which means under the lid of your garbage can, so that we can have a dialogue about this and involve a lot of different perspectives and start moving forward towards the goals that we articulated at the beginning. Does that work for discussion at our next meeting? Great. So we'll go about taking notes from this evening and reviewing the minutes. And Tony and I will work with Peter and the engineer and see if we can come up with a short list that a list that captures the various electives that we have here available to us. Our next item and our last item on the agenda is to discuss any options for approvals for amendments to RSU facilities that may or may not need to be adjusted as the schools figure out how to reopen in the middle of a public health pandemic. Peter, I know we had expressed some communication to the facilities director at the RSU. Did anything come forward that needs council action or discussion this evening?
Nope, I have about 2 minutes to tell you what's going on, if that's okay. And yes, we've had conversations with Dennis. There's nothing that needs action, but there's probably some awareness that should be put out there.
Great, please proceed.
And so Caroline and I met with Dennis this afternoon, and he is definitely, as everyone at the school district is, should get a pat on the back because they're all going crazy right now trying to figure out what they're going to do with facilities and try to come up with alternative workarounds to make space work. They're doing a good job, but part of the issue is they've got, as anybody who's listened to the school district, the RSU meetings knows there's space concerns in the individual schools. So they're looking at some outdoor options, moving things around, making changes outside of buildings, things like that. So there are a few specific items, and that may involve some portable classrooms at some of the facilities. It's definitely they're putting one at Moore Street that's now going to be moved from where it was approved by the project review board. And when we asked Dennis, so what happens at the middle school and the high school, the answer was basically like, we haven't, I'm not there yet. I'm being told, what I need to do in order. And he's just trying to make these things happen, basically trying to come up with solutions. So, so we also communicated to the superintendent's office that we're just trying to stay out of the way. They're going to need to do outdoor changes, exterior changes to buildings. Obviously, that falls under all of our zoning regs that they have to get those approved. They don't fall into any of our timelines. We don't fall into any of their timelines. That's a 20-day best case scenario approval process for a minor change to a building. I'm not about, and I don't think any of us want to kind of stand there and stand in the way of the schools opening back up and say you can't do that because that's a zoning violation because you were going to put it over here and now it's going over there. I think that's probably the worst example of bad government we could do right now. So we've communicated that to them. I just want to make the council aware that I think we're probably going to be telling them to go, if you need to make changes at your building, do it, occupy them. Assuming the only thing that we would probably draw the line on, obviously, is a life safety concern, fire, health, life safety, things like that. Obviously, if it needs to be sprinkled or capacity or anything like that, we couldn't approve it. We'd have to take action, but the school would never do something like that. They're good like that. So we would probably tell them our plan now is to say, yep, go ahead and do it. Go for an after the fact permit. This is vastly different than anything we would ever tell pretty much any commercial, residential, or any other government group. But because of the time crunch with the schools, that's where Caroline and I are falling on this. I want to float that out there to the council to make sure that I think that's consistent with the direction, we had with businesses at the start of the pandemic, that we were going to, pedal to the floor to make outdoor changes and make variations happen if we could, to give them as much leeway as they can. So I think that's consistent with what I heard from the council, but I want to make sure before we step outside of, the established standards that's kosher and okay with the council for us to be doing, with the goal of getting the schools open for September 8th.
Yeah, and I believe the context of temporary installations to accommodate flexing of populations in and out of the school building. So it's not like we're allowing someone to have a permit after the fact to, add a wing onto their building that's, hyperventilated or something. I mean, we're not talking about those kinds of changes. So I think that works fine. Councilor Tracy?
Yeah, consistently the council has looked at how can we support the community, and where appropriate, how can we support the schools, and we're in an unprecedented emergency pandemic. And I have participated, as many of you have participated in our RSU5 board meetings as observers, and the overwhelming parent community has said, please bring the children back to school. There are certainly safety concerns, and that's part of getting the kids outside in these outdoor spaces so that they can have the requisite spacing to reduce any transmission of respiratory droplets, et cetera. But it is a critical family issue in this community for working parents, many of whom are working full-time because they are essential workers or they have jobs that are now back to work full-time, that the children get out of the home and go back into the school. And that's not even addressing the quality of the education, that many parents aren't qualified to teach their children, and teachers are, and they're essential workers, and we need their help to teach our kids in person. So anything we can do to facilitate that movement really supports the working and sort of parent-child generation of our community, which is a huge cross-section of our community right now, everybody's feeling this acutely, but they are feeling it quite acutely. So I fully support anything that we can do, and I will make myself available for any emergency action at any time.
I agree with everything Councilor Tracy just said. I mean, and I love that Caroline and Peter have great common sense and stuff like this. And it just, I trust your judgment, Peter, and the signals that you're sending, I think, are the correct ones. We definitely want to do everything we can, just like we did for the business community. This is even more important. So thanks.
I predicted that's what everybody would feel, but we just have to say that publicly. And we've got still surprisingly 12 people in the audience. I think they heard schools an emergency and everybody was really interested. So this is the first, I think, time we've ever got off a high horsepower issue and had 12 people stick around to listen to us talk about other business updates. So that's good.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have a question for Peter? All right, that concludes our agenda. Councilor Riley?
If there is no summation on your part, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Let's adjourn. We have to vote. Councilor Riley?
Yes.
Councilor Tracy?
Yes.
Councilor Pilch?
Yes.
Councilor Horn?
Yes.
Councilor Whitney?
Yes.
Councilor Lawrence?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all. Great discussion this evening.
Good job.
And we'll continue the conversation of recycling and trash at our next meeting with a list of specific items that we can direct our FSAB.
Yeah, let's not trash it.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, Caroline. See you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Peter. Bye, guys.